It started with dust. A century of it, lying thick on a wooden chest tucked beneath the crooked beams of an old English attic. The air smelled of oak and time. Claire Whitmore stood still, her flashlight cutting through the dark. She'd inherited the house from her late grandfather, who'd told her it was full of ghosts but kind ones. She knelt beside the chest, brushing her fingers across its brass lock. The initials EW were carved on the lid. She hesitated, then pried it open. Inside were stacks of yellowed envelopes tied with a faded blue ribbon. Some were stained, others torn. Each bore the same return address, written in neat cursive. Private Edward Wren, 3rd Battalion, British Expeditionary Force, France. Claire felt a chill. There were dozens of letters, maybe 100, none opened. She picked one, trembling slightly, and broke the brittle seal. Dearest Lily, the guns have gone quiet for the night, and I can almost hear the sea back home. His words were soft, almost tender, but halfway through, the ink smudged into a streak of mud. A faint scent of earth clung to the paper. Claire sat on the attic floor, reading by the weak light of her phone, completely still. She read until dawn, letter after letter, each more haunting than the last. It felt as if the soldier's voice was whispering from another world. When morning came, she realized something strange. Every letter ended abruptly, mid-sentence. None had ever been sent, and on the last one, a smear of dried blood marked the bottom corner. Claire couldn't stop thinking about him, Private Edward Wren. The name felt oddly familiar, like a half-remembered melody. She brewed herself tea, sat by the attic window, and opened another envelope. The paper cracked faintly, fragile as breath. My dearest Lily, the rain hasn't stopped for days. The mud swallowed half the camp, and the lads joke we'll soon be swimming to the front. But I still keep your picture in my breast pocket, dry and safe. It's what keeps me steady when the guns start. The handwriting was careful, almost gentle. Between the lines, she sensed longing and exhaustion. Claire imagined him crouched in a trench, candle flickering, trying to write while shells thundered in the distance. She could almost hear the echoes. Suddenly, a photograph slipped from the envelope. It showed a young woman in a light summer dress, smiling shyly, holding a book. On the back, in the same hand, for my Lily. May this war end before my ink runs dry. Claire's throat tightened. She searched online that night. War archives, census records, anything with Edward Wren. There were dozens of Wrens, hundreds of Edwards, but one name matched. Private Edward Wren, missing in action, 1917, Battle of Passchendaele. Her pulse quickened. Missing in action. No grave, no return. And now, a century later, his letters had found their way into her hands. When she looked again at the open envelope, she noticed something faint, a second layer of ink beneath the first, almost invisible, words written and then erased. She tilted it under the lamp, and a line appeared. They said we'd be home by Christmas, but something's wrong here, Lily. Something they won't tell us. A soft shiver ran down her spine. She knew she had to read them all, but she didn't yet understand that the letters were not just memories, they were warnings. By the third night, Claire had moved all the letters to her study. The attic felt too cold now, too watchful. She laid them out carefully on her desk, sorted by date, or what she could make out of the dates, for some were blurred, others half-torn by damp and time. The earliest was November 1916. She opened it under the glow of a desk lamp, its light trembling as though the bulb itself felt uneasy. Lily, today they brought in new boys. Barely men, most of them. They talk of victory like it's something we can just march toward. But out here, the sky eats the sun, and even the birds sound afraid. Still, I tell them jokes, so they won't see me shake. There was a drop of something dark on the edge. Ink, maybe, or old blood. Claire traced it with her fingertip, wondering whose fear it had captured. As she read, the house creaked softly, like a sigh moving through the floorboards. It made her pause. She thought she heard a faint murmur, perhaps the wind outside, perhaps not. It almost sounded like someone whispering. She glanced around the empty room, the open window, the fluttering curtains. Nothing. Then she noticed it, a pattern. In every letter, one word was written slightly darker than the rest. Home, 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 over and over. Each time, the ink pressed deeper into the page, as though Edward had been carving it into the paper rather than writing. And yet, none of the letters had ever been sent. Claire checked the last one she'd opened. Beneath the visible words, faint impressions lingered, written, then rubbed away. She held it to the light and gasped. There, just barely legible, were the words. "If this letter is found, I am still here." A chill rippled through her. The air grew heavier, colder. Then, from the attic above her, a sound, slow, deliberate, the scrape of wood against wood. Someone, or something, had moved the chest. Claire froze, staring up at the ceiling. The sound was unmistakable, a dragging, scraping movement above her head. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The attic door was still open from earlier, the ladder down, shadows trembling at its mouth. "Hello," she called softly. Her voice came out thinner than she meant it to. No answer, only silence. And then, faintly, the whisper of wind slipping through old rafters. She climbed the steps, one by one, her phone flashlight trembling in her hand. The attic looked unchanged. The chest was still there, open and empty now, letters scattered like fallen leaves. But one thing was new. A single letter lay on the floorboards, one she hadn't seen before. It was cleaner, newer somehow, though the same familiar handwriting stretched across it. The date made her skin prickle. October 5th, 1917, the very day she was reading it, only 108 years earlier. She crouched and opened it. The paper was cool, almost damp. "Lily, I dreamt I came home last night. But when I walked through our door, no one knew me. The village was quiet, empty, and the air smelled of smoke. I think I'm writing now only to remind myself I'm real." Claire's breath caught. The lamp flickered. "They're sending us forward tomorrow. The men say it's cursed ground. They find things buried there, not bodies, but faces." I laughed, but when I looked in the mud, I thought I saw my own reflection looking back. The words ended there. Beneath them, pressed into the page so faintly she almost missed it, were the letters CW. Her initials. The attic floor groaned beneath her knees. Somewhere behind her, the chest lid creaked shut on its own. And through the still air, so quietly she thought she imagined it, came a whisper, not from behind, but from inside the chest itself. "Read them all before it's too late." Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat in the attic, wrapped in a blanket, surrounded by Edward's words. The air was cold enough to sting, yet the room felt alive, listening, waiting. Outside, the wind moaned across the moors, rattling the old windows like breath on glass. She opened another letter, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. "My Lily, the ground shakes every morning now. It's as if the earth itself is tired of swallowing men. Yesterday, we found an officer's diary half buried in the mud, the pages written in red ink. But it wasn't ink. We didn't keep it. The handwriting was different this time, rushed, almost frantic. I keep hearing a sound after dark. Not the guns, not the shells, something beneath us. Like knocking, as if the dead are trying to come up." Claire exhaled shakily, her breath misting in the cold. She read the next line aloud, barely above a whisper. "If I don't make it home, I'll still try to write. You'll know it's me. You'll feel it." The attic light flickered, dimmed, then went out. Her phone's flashlight blinked weakly, the battery dying faster than it should have. In the darkness, she heard it again, that faint, rhythmic tapping. It wasn't from the window. It wasn't from the wind. It was coming from underneath the floorboards. Claire's heart hammered. Slowly, she crouched, pressing her ear to the cold wood. The tapping continued, steady, measured, like fingers brushing against the other side. And then, a voice, soft, muffled, but unmistakably human. "Lily." She stumbled back, knocking over a stack of letters. The chest creaked open slightly, though she hadn't touched it. Inside, something gleamed, a small metal tag, buried among the papers. She reached for it, wiping off the dust. The inscription read, "Private Edward Wren, 3rd Battalion, missing 1917. The tag was warm to the touch. The warmth of the tag lingered in Claire's palm long after she set it down. She stared at it, the dull shine, the faint scratches around the edges, as if it might suddenly pulse again. The air in the attic had grown heavier, almost wet, and a smell drifted up through the cracks in the floorboards. Earth, damp and old, like rain-soaked soil that had never seen sunlight. She gathered the fallen letters back into their pile, but one had slipped farther beneath the desk. She reached for it, fingertips brushing the wood. Her nails scraped something rough, not paper, not dust. She pulled back a loose floorboard and saw a narrow gap. Something was wedged inside. A small, mud-caked notebook. Her pulse quickened as she pried it free. The cover was leather, the initials barely visible, EW. She opened the first page. The handwriting was the same, Edwards. October 10th, 1917. We were ordered forward again. I can't see the sky anymore, just smoke and broken faces. Men vanish in the night. We hear them calling, but when we search, there's only mud. The ground eats everything. The ink smeared near the bottom, as though written in a shaking hand. Lily, if this reaches you, know I did not die. Something happened to me. Something beneath us. It knows our names. Claire's breath caught. A gust of wind slammed the attic window, scattering papers. She turned and froze. The chest had moved again, closer to her this time, though she hadn't heard it. The lid hung slightly open, the inside black as pitch. And then she saw it. A faint shape, just beneath the papers. A boot print. Wet, muddy, fresh. The tapping returned, not from below this time, but behind her. Slow, deliberate. She turned her flashlight toward the corner, and the beam fell on a dark stain spreading across the floorboards. It wasn't dust. It was mud, still wet. The mud spread slowly, inching toward her feet like something alive. Claire stumbled back, her heart thudding so loud she thought the whole house could hear it. The attic smelled of wet soil now, raw, earthy, and wrong. She could swear she felt the floor tremble faintly beneath her, as if something moved far below. "Stop it," she whispered. "It's just old wood. Just old wood." But when she looked again, there were footprints. Clear, heavy ones, leading from the chest toward the far wall. Each print was darker at the center, fading around the edges, as though pressed by a real, solid weight. She followed them, every nerve screaming not to, until she reached the wall. The print stopped there. Nothing but cold stone and cobwebs. Then came a faint metallic clink, the sound of something dropping. She turned sharply, and there it was on the floor beside the chest, another tag. But this one read, C. Whitmore, civilian. Her breath caught. Her name. She backed away, shaking her head, but the chest lid suddenly slammed shut with a violent crack. The letters flew from the desk like startled birds, scattering through the air. Pages fluttered everywhere, and for a moment, she thought she saw shapes forming in the storm of paper. Faces, eyes, hands reaching. A voice broke through the chaos. Low, hoarse, and close. "Help me, Lily." The sound came from right behind her ear. She spun around, but the attic was empty. Only the echo of her own ragged breathing filled the space. She grabbed her phone, desperate for light, for noise, for something real. The screen flickered, and for a brief second, the camera opened on its own. The reflection showed her face, and behind her, the faint outline of a man in uniform, standing perfectly still. When she turned, there was no one there. But on the screen, he was still watching. Claire dropped the phone. It hit the wooden floor with a hollow thud, screen still glowing faintly in the dark. For a heartbeat, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The afterimage of that figure clung to her vision. A young man in a torn British uniform, his face half-shadowed, eyes hollow yet strangely pleading. She forced herself to pick up the phone again. The screen flickered once more, then cleared. No figure now, just her reflection, pale and shaking. But something was different. Behind her, on the camera feed, the chest lid was open again. She turned sharply. It was closed. Her mind raced. "I'm imagining this," she whispered, but even her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. Then the phone vibrated violently in her hand. A notification appeared, an email, though there was no Wi-Fi signal in the old house. The sender's name made her blood run cold, Edward Wren. The subject line read, "I kept writing." With trembling fingers, she opened it. There was no text, only an attached image, a photograph. Mud, darkness, barbed wire, and in the center, a figure kneeling in a trench, head bowed. The image was grainy, but she could see the uniform clearly. The name tag glinted faintly on his chest. E. Wren. Her hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the phone again. But then, a second vibration. Another message. "You're reading them, aren't you? You found me." Claire's pulse thundered. She typed quickly, irrationally. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You promised you'd wait, Lily. I'm coming home." The attic light flickered once more. A sharp knock came from the floor, once, twice, 3 times. And then, silence. When she looked back at the screen, a single new message had appeared. No text this time, only a live video feed. From the same attic. But in the feed, she wasn't alone. For a long, breathless moment, Claire just stared at the glowing screen. The live feed showed the attic, the same dim light, the same scattered letters, the same chest. But in the far corner of the video, where her eyes couldn't quite focus, stood a man. He wasn't clear. His outline shimmered like heat above asphalt, flickering between solid and smoke. The faint glint of brass buttons caught the light. A soldier's cap shadowed his face. Claire slowly turned her head toward the corner, but there was nothing there. Only air. Only dust. She looked back at the phone. The man in the feed had moved closer. Her throat tightened. The camera shook in her hand as she whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. The man took another step forward, and the sound of boots echoed softly across the attic, though she could see no one in front of her. Then, on the phone screen, his face lifted into view. Mud streaked his cheeks, and his eyes, dull, gray, searching, met hers. "You opened the letters," he said. The voice didn't come from the phone. It came from the room. Claire stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. "You're not real," she gasped. "You're..." I waited for her. The air turned icy. Her breath fogged in front of her. The figure on the phone screen raised a trembling hand, palm outward, and the attic's chest creaked open in perfect unison. Papers rustled. A gust of wind howled through the open window, scattering them into the air. One landed at Claire's feet. She looked down. It wasn't a letter this time. It was a photograph. Faded, but clear enough. A woman stood beside a small garden fence, smiling shyly. On the back, written in the same looping hand, "My Lily Whitmore." Claire's hands went numb. Whitmore. Her last name. The soldier's voice came again, softer now, almost breaking. "You came back." And with that, the feed cut to black. The attic felt smaller now, as if the air itself had drawn in closer around her. Claire sat on the floor, clutching the faded photograph. Her fingers trembled, tracing the faint outline of the woman's face. Lily Whitmore. It couldn't be coincidence. Downstairs, the old clock struck midnight, the sound deep and heavy through the floorboards. She hadn't realized how long she'd been up here. Her tea was cold, her breath shallow, her thoughts tangled. She whispered the name aloud. Lily Whitmore. The chest creaked. She froze. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, the lid rising by inches. A sigh of stale air escaped from inside, thick with the smell of soil and rust. Claire forced herself closer. Inside lay a letter she hadn't seen before. The paper was fresher than the others, the ink darker. It wasn't yellowed or fragile. It looked as though it had been written yesterday. Her heart pounded. She lifted it carefully and began to read. "Lily, I tried to find you. I searched the fields long after the guns went silent. But the earth here remembers. It doesn't let go of its dead. I've written through mud and rain, through years and nothingness. I know you can hear me now. I know you've come back." Claire's eyes darted to the signature, Edward. Something warm slid down her cheek. A tear, though she didn't remember crying. She took a shaky breath and whispered, "Edward, I'm not Lily." The air shifted. The lamp flickered. "Yes," came the voice, calm, certain, and close. "You are." The papers rustled in unison, a soft storm of pages rising into the air. Each letter began to hum faintly, as if vibrating with life. The chest trembled. The photograph slipped from her hand, landing face up on the floor. In that instant, she saw it clearly. The woman in the picture wasn't just smiling. She was her. The same eyes. The same small scar on the lip. The voice spoke once more, almost tender now. "I never stopped writing to you." And then the lamp burst, plunging the attic into darkness. The glass from the shattered lamp scattered across the attic floor, catching the moonlight that leaked through the narrow window. Claire's breathing came shallow and fast. The air was so still it seemed the house itself had stopped to listen. She crouched, trying to find her phone, its faint glow the only light left. When she grabbed it, the screen flickered back to life, but something was wrong. It wasn't her home screen anymore. It was the camera app, open on its own, and the camera was pointing straight at her face. Behind her reflection, the darkness moved. Not fast, just a slow ripple, like water shifting around something submerged. Then, From somewhere deep below the floorboards came the distant sound of boots. Marching, dozens of them. Heavy, rhythmic, getting louder. Claire's pulse raced. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop." The sound did not. Instead, the attic door creaked open. A draft swept up from the staircase, and with it, a faint smell of gunpowder and mud. She held her breath, listening. A man's voice drifted through the gloom. Faint, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "Hold the line, don't let them fall." Her blood ran cold. It was the same voice. Edward's. She crept toward the door, the floor groaning beneath her. The sound of marching faded, replaced by something worse, a low, dragging noise, as if someone were pulling themselves across the wooden floor. "Edward," she called, barely able to say his name. The dragging stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, softly, "You promised to wait." Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. A new message appeared on the cracked screen. From EW. Message, "Come home." And then, without her touching it, the phone switched to its compass app. The arrow spun wildly, then settled, pointing straight down, toward the floor beneath her feet. The compass arrow held steady, quivering but unmoving, pointing straight at the floorboards beneath her knees. Claire stared at it, numb. She tapped the screen, tried to reset it, but the arrow always swung back to the same place, dead center of the attic, right over the old chest. Her heart thudded in her ears. "There's nothing there," she whispered, though her voice cracked. "Just wood. Just." The floor creaked softly beneath her words. She grabbed a nearby screwdriver and began prying at one of the loose planks. Dust rose in faint spirals, carrying the scent of wet soil and iron. The board lifted with a groan, and beneath it, black earth. Cold, damp, fresh. She dug with her hands. Her fingers met something solid. Metal. When she pulled it free, she found another tag, caked with dirt. She wiped it clean. The inscription made her chest tighten. Private Edward Wren, returned. 1918. Returned, she whispered. "But you never came back." A gust of wind slammed the attic window, and the letters fluttered up again, swirling like a snowstorm of ghosts. The papers brushed her face, clinging to her hair, her clothes, as if reaching for her. She backed away, gasping. The compass arrow still pointed down, but now the phone screen had changed again. The display showed a location, an old map, faded and rough, marked by a red pin labeled Ypres, Belgium. Her breath caught. The battlefields. Another notification appeared. Message from EW. Follow the path. Bring the letters. The phone buzzed again, violently now, until she dropped it. The screen cracked and went black. In the dark, the voice came once more, closer, clearer, filled with grief. "You left me there, Lily. You left us all." Claire turned toward the sound, her pulse hammering. The outline of the soldier stood again by the chest, more solid than before, the faint gleam of his dog tag catching the moonlight. He raised his hand slowly, palm open, mud dripping from his sleeve. "Help me go home." And for the first time, she didn't run. For a long time, Claire couldn't speak. The figure in front of her was solid now, no longer a shimmer or a shadow. He looked young, far too young to have carried a rifle. His uniform was torn, the mud on it darker than soil, almost black. Yet his eyes were unmistakably human, tired, kind, and full of sorrow. "Edward," she breathed. He didn't move. His gaze drifted to the open chest, then back to her. "You kept my words," he said softly, the accent faintly northern, every syllable stretched with weariness. "They were all I had left." Claire's hands shook. "I'm not Lily. I'm Claire. I just found them." He tilted his head, almost curious. Different name. Same eyes. He stepped forward. The air seemed to pulse with cold as he did. "You promised, Lily, that if I ever lost my way, you'd bring me home." She backed up until her shoulders brushed the wall. "What do you want from me?" He looked down, fingers tracing the edge of his tag. "To remember. To rest." The attic groaned, dust falling from the beams above. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, though the sky outside was clear. Claire forced herself to breathe. "How? How do I help you rest?" He lifted a trembling hand, pointing at the chest. "Finish what I could not." She looked at the letters spilling across the floor. So many, each one unfinished, cut short by battle or silence. "Write the last one," he whispered. "Write it for me." Claire's pulse thundered in her ears. She crouched, grabbing a pen and the nearest scrap of blank paper. Her hand hovered, trembling, as she looked up at him. "Tell me what to say." Edward's expression softened. Relief, maybe even gratitude. "Tell her I came home," he said. "Tell her I remember the sea. Tell her I'm not afraid anymore." She began to write. Each word seemed to steady the air, soften the cold. But when she reached the end of the page and looked up again, he was gone. Only the faint outline of muddy footprints remained, leading toward the attic door. And for the first time in nights, the house was still. Claire sat motionless, the pen still in her hand. The air around her felt lighter somehow, as though the attic had exhaled after holding its breath for a century. The silence was complete. No whispers, no footsteps, no tapping from beneath the floorboards. Only her heartbeat, soft and rhythmic, filling the emptiness. She looked down at the letter she'd just written. The ink shimmered faintly in the moonlight, as if the words themselves were alive. She read them again. "My dearest Lily, I found my way home. The war has ended, and so has the waiting. I will see you in the fields where no guns sound, where the sea sings without fear. Until then, remember me kindly. Yours always, Edward." As her eyes traced the final line, a drop of warmth brushed her fingers. She flinched, thinking it was a tear, but it wasn't hers. The ink was glowing faintly gold, spreading from the words outward. The paper pulsed once, twice, and then, gently, the light spilled from the page, filling the room with a soft, amber glow. The scattered letters on the floor began to tremble, their corners curling upward as though waking. One by one, they lifted into the air, circling slowly around her. The attic filled with the faint hum of thousands of whispered voices, men, women, all overlapping in quiet gratitude. Claire covered her mouth, eyes wide. The letters floated toward the open window, carried by an invisible current. Outside, the wind had gone still. The papers drifted out, scattering into the night sky like fireflies, disappearing into the stars. When the last one had gone, only the letter she'd written remained on the desk, glowing softly. Claire reached out to touch it, but before her fingers met the page, it faded into light, leaving only a faint trace of warmth against her palm. And then, as if carried by that same warmth, came one last whisper, faint and peaceful. "Thank you, Lily." The attic fell silent again. The air smelled of rain and sea salt. Claire sat there for a long time, staring at her empty hand, feeling both heavier and lighter than she ever had before. Then she noticed something on the floor where Edward had stood, his dog tag. But now it bore new words, freshly etched into the metal. Home, 1918. Morning crept softly into the attic, turning the dust in the air to gold. Claire hadn't realized she'd fallen asleep on the floor. When she woke, her head rested against the open chest, her fingers still curled around Edward's tag. The house was quiet now. No whispers, no footsteps, only the faint ticking of the clock below. For a moment, she thought the night's events might have been a dream. But then she saw the floor. Faint muddy footprints still led to the door, drying slowly in the new light. She rubbed her eyes, sat up, and noticed the chest. It would seem different, warmer. The cracks along the lid had sealed, and the initials EW looked freshly carved, as though someone had cut them only hours ago. Something inside caught the light, a glint of silver. Claire reached in and pulled out a small metal case, thin and rectangular. She had missed it before, buried beneath the letters. When she flipped it open, she found a locket, inside of which was a photograph of a young soldier in uniform, smiling faintly. On the opposite side, a woman's face. Lily Whitmore. Her breath caught. The same eyes. The same quiet curve of a smile she'd seen in her reflection. Beneath the locket lay one final folded note, the handwriting unsteady but unmistakable. To whoever finds this, the war took my voice, but not my heart. If she cannot read my words, let her live them. Let her remember that we were more than soldiers. We were love that refused to die. Claire pressed the letter to her chest. For the first time since she'd entered the attic, she felt peace, not only Edward's, but her own. Then, just as she was about to close the chest for good, she heard a faint rustle. Something inside shifted, a piece of fabric. She lifted it out carefully. It was an old British Army field flag, folded tight, edges still marked with dried mud. But as she unfolded it, she saw something sewn into the inside seam. a map. Hand-drawn. The same symbol from her phone, the red mark over Ypres. In the corner of the map, a single line was written in small, deliberate letters. One still waits. The air grew colder again. Claire looked toward the attic window, where the morning light dimmed for just an instant. Somewhere, far away, another story was waiting to be found. A week later, Claire stood beneath a gray Belgian sky. The air was damp and heavy with the scent of rain and turned soil. Before her stretched the rolling fields of Ypres, green again, peaceful, yet haunted by silence. The locals said that when the wind blew from the west, you could still hear echoes of the guns. She clutched Edward's tag in one hand, the old map in the other. The faded red mark guided her down a narrow dirt path between the hedgerows. Wild poppies dotted the ground, their red petals trembling in the breeze like drops of memory. She passed rows of white headstones, endless, perfect rows. Names half erased by weather. Unknown soldier. Missing in action. Lost at Passchendaele. Every step she took felt heavier. Not from fear this time, but from the weight of all those untold stories. At the edge of a field, she stopped. The map said here, but there was nothing except a low mound covered in grass and scattered stones. She knelt and brushed away the earth. Beneath it lay wood, splintered, ancient. A small crate, half buried and sealed with rusted hinges. Her breath caught. "No way," she whispered. She pried it open with trembling hands. Inside were scraps of paper, waterlogged, faded beyond reading, and one rusted tin box. When she lifted the lid, a single dry letter remained, wrapped carefully in cloth. The handwriting was weak, but still visible. October 1917. If you find this, know that I did not die afraid. The others are here with me. We are waiting for dawn that never came. Tell her I heard her voice across the years. Tell her the sea still sings. Claire's eyes filled. The letter was addressed to Lily Whitmore, but on the back, faintly, another note had been added later. For the one who remembers. The ground around her seemed to hum quietly, as if the air itself acknowledged the moment. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo of men's laughter. Young, brief, free. She closed the tin and pressed her hand against the mound. "You're home now, Edward," she whispered. The poppies swayed. The clouds parted slightly, letting a shaft of sunlight fall across the grass. For the first time since she'd opened that chest, she felt the story settling into peace. And yet, as she stood to leave, she noticed something strange. On the other side of the field, among the rows of stones, one grave stood freshly marked. The inscription read, "Private Edward Wren, 1895 to 1918. Found and returned, 2025. Claire stood frozen, staring at the headstone. The letters were sharp, freshly carved, the marble gleaming white against the damp grass. A small wooden cross rested at its base, tied with a strip of blue ribbon, the same shade that had bound Edward's letters in her attic. Her pulse quickened. This grave hadn't been here when she'd arrived. She'd walked the rows carefully, reading every name. Private Edward Wren, found and returned, 2025. Someone had placed it today. Her hands trembled as she knelt beside it. The earth beneath the headstone was undisturbed, no sign of recent digging. No flowers, no marks of tools. Only the stone itself, solid and impossibly new. A chill rippled through her. "Who did this?" she whispered. The wind answered with a low, hollow sigh that swept through the fields. Poppies bent their stems. Then she saw it, tucked between the grass near the base of the grave. A single envelope, crisp and unstained, her name written across it in familiar looping handwriting. Claire Whitmore. Her stomach turned. She opened it carefully. "You found me, Lily. And because of that, I found my way home. The others are waking, too, one by one. Their names remembered, their words returned. But there's one more place you must go. The war began in the mud, but it ended in the sea." At the bottom of the letter was a location, Dover, England. Claire exhaled shakily. Dover, the very coast she could almost see in the distance, across the channel. She looked up again at the grave. The sunlight shifted through the clouds, falling directly across the marble. The words "found" and "returned" seemed to glow faintly for just a second before dimming again. Then she noticed a second line of text, one that hadn't been there moments before, etching itself into the stone like invisible ink being revealed by fire. "Don't forget them." The ground beneath her feet vibrated softly, like a sigh from deep below. And just for an instant, she thought she saw movement at the edge of the field, dark silhouettes in uniform, standing quietly among the rows, watching her. When she blinked, they were gone. But the air still carried the faint echo of Edward's voice, warm and distant. The sea remembers, Lily. Go there. The ferry rocked gently beneath a pale morning sky. Waves broke softly against the hull, carrying with them the smell of salt and rain. Claire stood at the railing, the map clutched tightly in her pocket, the dog tag resting cold against her chest. Each mile brought her closer to Dover, to the cliffs where England rose from the sea like a memory of home. She hadn't planned this journey. It felt as though something unseen guided her, Edward's last request echoing in her mind. The war began in the mud, but it ended in the sea. When the white cliffs finally appeared through the mist, she felt her throat tighten. They seemed to glow from within, bright and silent, ancient witnesses to both departure and return. At the port, she rented a car and followed the coastline road until it narrowed to a small lane leading to the edge of the cliffs. The wind was stronger here, the sea roaring below like a heartbeat too vast to comprehend. She parked, stepped out, and felt the earth tremble faintly beneath her boots, not from fear, but from history itself. A small memorial stood at the edge, a weathered stone wall lined with brass plaques, names carved deep into the metal. She ran her fingers along them. Soldiers, sailors, nurses, all lost to the channel's cold depths. And then she saw it, a new plaque gleaming among the old ones. Private Edward Wren, returned across the sea, 2025. Beneath his name, a simple engraving. He wrote until home answered. Claire's eyes stung. She touched the plaque gently. The metal felt warm. Behind her, the wind shifted. The sea spray rose high, catching the sunlight in 1,000 flickering sparks. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw figures along the water. Faint silhouettes standing shoulder to shoulder, their outlines merging with the mist. Edward was among them. She knew it. A voice, calm and steady, drifted on the wind. You carried the letters farther than I ever could. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You're home now, she whispered. It's over. But as she turned to leave, something white fluttered past her, a piece of paper carried by the wind. It caught against her shoe. She picked it up. A single, handwritten line. The sea still sings, but one voice is missing. And at the bottom, barely legible, Dover tunnels, below. The cliffs loomed above her like a question yet unanswered. The entrance was half hidden by ivy and thyme. A narrow, crumbling archway cut into the chalk of the cliffside, barely wide enough for one person. A faded sign nearby read, Dover Defense Tunnels, closed to the public. Claire hesitated. The wind howled across the cliffs behind her, and the sea crashed below, echoing like distant thunder. She gripped Edward's tag and stepped inside. The air changed instantly, cooler, damp, carrying the faint metallic tang of rust and forgotten years. Her phone's flashlight flickered to life, the beam cutting through the dark. The walls were rough chalk, the floor scattered with old boards and broken helmets, relics left from both wars. Every sound echoed too long. Her footsteps came back to her like someone walking just behind. She followed the narrow corridor deeper until it opened into a small chamber. On one wall, faint graffiti still clung to the stone, names, ranks, dates. Men leaving pieces of themselves before the fight. She ran her fingers over the carved words. E. Wren, 1917. Her breath hitched. It was his handwriting. Beneath it, scratched faintly into the rock, another line. The sea will keep what we cannot bury. Claire's light wavered. Something ahead glimmered faintly, metal catching the beam. She stepped closer and found a shallow pool, fed by water dripping slowly from the ceiling. The pool's surface rippled, reflecting her face and, for a moment, another, a young man's, beside hers. Her voice shook. Edward. The reflection didn't move, but the water quivered, and in it she saw images, flashes of the past. Men huddled in the tunnels during air raids, writing by candlelight. Letters tucked beneath helmets. Boots marching, fading, gone. The light dimmed. The phone buzzed once, a new message, though she had no signal. From EW. Message, one voice remains. Claire turned sharply. In the corner of the chamber, half buried in chalk dust, lay another small chest, older than the one in her attic. Her pulse quickened. She knelt, brushing away the dirt, and saw something carved faintly into the lid, words nearly erased by time. For Lily, the last letter. She reached for it, her hand shaking. The moment her fingers touched the lock, the tunnel rumbled softly, dust falling from the ceiling. And somewhere deep within the darkness ahead came the faint echo of a man humming, a tune soft and slow, like a lullaby carried home across a century. The lock gave way with a soft click, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Claire lifted the lid slowly, her breath catching as the scent of old paper and sea salt filled the air. Inside, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, was a single envelope. The paper was yellowed but dry, its edges sealed with wax still faintly bearing the impression of a small seashell. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. On the front, written in the same graceful hand she now knew so well, were the words, "To Lily, when the sea falls silent." For a moment she couldn't move. The air in the tunnel felt heavy, expectant. She broke the seal gently, careful not to tear the paper, and unfolded the letter. "My dearest Lily, if you are reading this, the sea has quieted and the guns no longer speak. I have seen too much darkness to believe in forever, but I believe in you. When they called us forward, I carried your picture in my breast pocket. When the world fell apart, I closed my eyes and saw you at the shore, hair caught in the wind. You were the last thing I saw before the mud took me. I do not fear what comes after. I only fear being forgotten. If ever my words reach you, or anyone who still listens, promise me one thing. Remember the boys who never came home. Speak their names. That is how we return." Her eyes blurred. The paper trembled in her hands. The tunnel around her seemed to hum softly, a deep resonance rising through the walls. A breeze, impossible this far underground, brushed past her face. It carried the faint sound of waves, and a voice, clear and gentle. "Thank you, Lily." She turned, and for an instant, the darkness at the tunnel's edge filled with light. Warm, golden light, as if dawn had found its way underground. Figures stood within it, dozens of them, young and old, uniforms torn, faces calm. Edward stood among them, his hand raised in quiet salute. "Rest now," Claire whispered, her tears falling freely. "You're all home." The light brightened, spilling across the walls, until everything glowed like sunlight through water. Then it faded, leaving behind only silence, true, peaceful silence. When Claire looked down again, the letter was gone. In its place, a single white poppy rested on her lap, its petals impossibly fresh. She smiled through her tears. "Goodbye, Edward." And when she climbed out of the tunnel into the dawn, the sea was calm at last. Days passed before Claire truly felt the world again. Dover seemed quieter now, softer somehow, as if the cliffs themselves had exhaled after holding their breath for a century. She took the morning ferry back to France, the sea smooth and glassy beneath a pale sky. The journey home felt unreal. She replayed everything, the letters, the grave, the tunnels, over and over, half afraid it would all dissolve into dream if she stopped. But the poppy she carried in her pocket stayed white and whole, untouched by time. When she arrived back at the old house, it greeted her with stillness. The attic door was slightly ajar. She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand grazing the worn banister, feeling the familiar rhythm of each step beneath her. The chest sat where she had left it, the wood faintly glowing in the late afternoon light. For a long while, she simply stood there, listening to the quiet. Then, something caught her eye, a small, square object leaning against the wall. A framed photograph she didn't remember seeing before. She lifted it carefully. It was a black and white picture of a soldier standing beside a young woman on a pier, Edward and Lily. But there was something else. In the reflection of the shop window behind them, faint and blurred, she could see herself. Same coat, same hair, same eyes. Her heart pounded. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." The air in the attic shifted again, not cold this time, but warm, like the breath of summer after rain. She turned toward the mirror on the far wall. For a heartbeat, her reflection flickered, and in its place stood Lily Whitmore. The woman smiled softly, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you," the reflection whispered. "You carried my promise farther than I ever could." Claire stepped forward, tears stinging her eyes. "You were never forgotten." Lily's reflection reached out, and though their hands could not touch, Light shimmered between them, soft and golden, like the last sunset of a long war. Then the reflection faded. The mirror showed only Claire, tired, tear-streaked, but at peace. She turned back toward the chest. It was empty now, except for a folded note resting at the bottom. She unfolded it slowly. History remembers dates. Love remembers names. E.W. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and poppies. Claire smiled. "Goodbye, Edward," she whispered one last time. And from somewhere deep within the house, faint as memory, came the sound of a pen scratching across paper, the end of a letter that had finally been delivered. A month later, the world outside had changed. Spring had come to England, and the fields that once lay gray and bare were now painted with poppies again, red against green, like hearts that had learned to beat after silence. Claire sat at her desk, the morning light streaming through the window of her small flat. The chest from the attic now rested open beside her, empty but for Edward's tag and the white poppy. Before her lay stacks of paper, fresh pages filled with her handwriting. Each line carried a story she had pieced together from his letters, his words, and the memories that had lived too long in the dark. The book's title was written neatly on the first page. Letters from the Trench, the lost voice of Private Edward Wren. Her publisher had loved it instantly, though they asked her more than once how she discovered such vivid details, the dates, the feelings, the words no archive held. Claire only smiled and said, "He told me." The first copies were printed weeks later. When she held one in her hands, she ran her fingers over the embossed title and felt a faint warmth beneath the paper, as though the story itself breathed. That evening, she visited the local war memorial. The stone steps glistened from recent rain. She laid the white poppy at the base, beside a cluster of fresh red ones, and placed one of her books next to it. A small group of passers-by stopped to read the inscription on the poppy's tag. For those who wrote and were never read. One older man removed his cap, nodding slowly. "My grandfather fought at Ypres," he murmured. "Never came home." Claire's throat tightened. "Then this is for him too." As twilight deepened, she sat on the steps, the book in her lap. The city lights flickered on, one by one, and in the soft glow she thought she saw a figure standing just beyond the memorial, a young man in uniform, watching quietly. He lifted a hand in a slow, grateful salute before fading back into the evening mist. And though no one else seemed to see him, Claire smiled. "You're remembered," she whispered. The wind rose, rustling the pages of the open book. For an instant, she could swear she heard his voice again, faint, but filled with peace. Then our letters were not in vain. Within weeks, letters from the trench spread across the world like a quiet tide. Newspapers called it a haunting resurrection of forgotten souls. Schools began reading excerpts on Remembrance Day. Museums requested copies for display. Claire's inbox overflowed with messages, soldiers' descendants, teachers, even strangers who said the book had made them cry for names they'd never known. But one email stood out. It came from Vermont, USA, the subject line reading simply, "We found something that belongs to you." The sender was an elderly man named James Whitmore. The surname struck her instantly, Whitmore, like Lily. She opened the message with trembling hands. "Dear Ms. Whitmore, I read your book last month, and I think you might want to see what my family found years ago in an old barn on our property. It's a trunk filled with letters, all addressed to someone named Lily Whitmore, from a British soldier named Edward Wren. They were never delivered. My great-grandfather served in the postal division during the war, and when he died, the box passed down to us. I never knew what to do with it until I saw your name. Please, come. It's time they went home." Claire reread the message twice, heart racing. Across an entire ocean, the other half of Edward's words had waited, undelivered, untouched, for more than a century. That night, she booked a flight. 2 weeks later, she stood on the porch of a small farmhouse in Vermont. The man who greeted her was kind-eyed, his hair silver, his hands calloused. "You must be Claire," he said warmly. "I feel like I've been waiting for you." Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and old paper. On a sturdy oak table sat a trunk almost identical to the one from her attic. The same worn brass, the same pattern burned into the lid. James opened it slowly. Inside were stacks of envelopes tied in blue ribbon, perfectly preserved. Claire reached out, fingers trembling. "These are," he nodded, "Edward's words to Lily. the ones that never made it across the sea. She lifted one gently, feeling the weight of it, the history folded inside. The handwriting was unmistakable, flowing, tender, alive. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. He wrote them all for her, and now they've come back to me. James smiled softly. Maybe because you're the one who finally listened. Outside, the wind brushed through the autumn leaves, carrying the faintest echo of waves across an impossible distance. And for the first time in her life, Claire felt that the story wasn't ending. It was only finding its way home. Claire sat at the table long after James had gone to make tea. The Vermont air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the faint hum of crickets outside the old farmhouse windows. The trunk of letters waited before her, history sleeping in blue ribbon. She untied the ribbon gently, the knot giving way like it had been waiting for her touch. The paper inside was pale cream, edges browned by time, but miraculously intact. The first envelope bore the familiar handwriting, slanted and elegant. To my Lily, across the sea. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside was a folded sheet, written in dark ink that still glimmered faintly in the lamplight. My Lily, the guns haven't stopped for days, and the rain has turned our trenches into graves before their time. I still keep your locket close, the one with the seashell inside. When the shells fall, I listen for the sea in it. It reminds me of home. I dream of you sometimes, standing on the cliffs, your hair caught in the wind. You look older in my dreams, as if time runs differently for us. Sometimes, I think I see another face beside you, someone who looks like you, but isn't. If you ever read this, promise me you'll forgive me for what's coming. We are to go over tomorrow. I will carry your voice with me. Edward. She froze. The mention of another face beside her. Older. Familiar. It couldn't be. Her hand shook as she reached for another letter, the next in the bundle. It was dated October 1917, 2 days after the last. The seal was cracked, as if someone had tried to open it and failed. She unfolded it slowly. Lily, the strangest thing happened last night. I thought I saw you. Not a dream, not in the dark, but standing right there, by the trench. You were holding something glowing, like a lantern. You looked afraid. I called to you, but the moment I did, the world exploded around us. When I woke, there was nothing left but smoke and mud. And yet, in the mud, I found your handkerchief. The one embroidered with a C. Tell me, Lily, who is C? The room went cold. Claire dropped the page. She had found an embroidered handkerchief in the attic, with a single C stitched into the corner. She thought it had belonged to her grandmother, but Edward had found it in the trenches 100 years before she was born. Her breath came shallow, her thoughts a whirl of disbelief. Edward had seen her. A creak came from the corner of the room. The window rattled once, though the air outside was still. And then, faintly, she heard a voice, soft as the rustle of paper. I told you, Lily, the sea remembers everything. The lamp flickered. The shadows in the room lengthened, bending toward the trunk as if drawn to it. Claire leaned forward, heart racing. There, beneath the stack of letters, lay one envelope unlike the others, sealed in red wax. Her name written across it in sharp, deliberate strokes. To Claire Whitmore. For a long time, Claire couldn't move. The envelope lay before her like a heartbeat, quiet, patient, alive. The name written across the front, Claire Whitmore, was sharp and deliberate, the ink darker than any on the other pages. It hadn't faded at all. Her rational mind whispered that it was impossible. Edward Wren had died in 1918. He couldn't have written to someone born nearly a century later. And yet, she could feel the faint hum of something familiar in the paper, the same warmth she'd felt when the letters first began to glow in her attic. She reached out, tracing her name with her fingertips. The wax was cold, unbroken. Slowly, she peeled it open. The letter inside was short, just a single page, the handwriting neat but heavy, as if written with effort. Claire, by now you have found the words that never reached her. I knew one day they would, though not to the hands I first intended. You have her heart, her name, her eyes. But you also have what she never did, the chance to be heard. The world will forget us if it must, but do not let it forget the cost. Do not let the letters end here. Tell them, all of them, there are still voices waiting in the silence. When you hear the sea, listen closely. That's where we are. Claire's breath hitched. Her eyes stung, but she couldn't look away. Beneath the signature, a faint mark had been pressed into the paper. A fingerprint, smudged but distinct. And there, pressed faintly into the bottom margin, were coordinates. 51.1290 degrees north, 1.3210 degrees east, Dover Cliffs. Her heart pounded. The same place. The sea that had ended one war and begun another story. She looked up from the letter. The window pane rattled once more, though the wind outside had stopped. The air smelled faintly of salt. Then, from the table beside the trunk, came a small clink. The dog tag, the one she'd left behind in England, was there, gleaming faintly in the lamplight. Her pulse jumped. How? The room was utterly still. And then, softly, the poppy she'd kept all this time trembled and dropped a single petal onto the letter, leaving a pale trace of dust in its shape. She stared at it, her voice barely a whisper. You're not finished, are you? Somewhere far away, beyond time or sea, the faint echo of a man's voice answered, quiet, steady, and filled with purpose. Not yet. The flight back to England felt both endless and instantaneous. Claire barely noticed the hours passing. Her mind was fixed on those numbers, the coordinates inked in Edward's hand. 51.1290 degrees north, 1.3210 degrees east. The cliffs, the sea, the beginning and end of everything. By the time she reached Dover, the evening mist had rolled in thick and low, curling over the cliffs like breath. The air carried the deep hum of the waves below, steady and eternal. She parked near the old war tunnels, but didn't go inside this time. The letter had told her where to go, but not why. The wind whipped at her coat as she walked along the edge of the cliffs. The light was fading fast, the world dissolving into gray. When she reached the exact coordinates, her phone vibrated once, a soft chime, though she'd turned off all notifications. The screen lit briefly, displaying 3 words she hadn't typed. You made it. Her heart stuttered. She looked around. Only empty air, restless sea, and the whispering grass. Then, a few meters ahead, she saw it, a weathered wooden post, half buried near the cliff's edge, marked with a single carved letter, E. She knelt beside it, brushing away dirt and moss. Beneath the post's base was a metal handle, rusted but intact. Her breath caught as she pulled. The earth shifted with a groan, revealing a small compartment built into the ground. Inside lay a tin box, identical to the ones she'd found before. But this one was newer. The metal wasn't corroded, the hinges smooth. She lifted the lid, her hands shaking. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. The first showed a young soldier standing on the cliffs. Edward, smiling faintly, the sea behind him calm. But the next photo made her heart stop. It was the same spot, same background, but this time it was her. Same coat, same windblown hair. She was standing in the exact place she was now, holding a letter in her hand. And behind her, barely visible in the mist, Edward's shadow stood beside her, not haunting, but waiting. The final photograph was blank, or almost. Faint writing bled through the corner, words printed in sepia ink. For the one who listens. Claire's eyes filled. She looked toward the sea, the horizon now burning faintly with the last light of dusk. The wind rose, carrying a sound that wasn't quite waves, a low, melodic hum, like 100 voices murmuring beneath the surface. She closed her eyes and whispered, I'm here. The sound grew stronger, soft, layered, endless. And then, from somewhere deep within that chorus, Edward's voice emerged, clear and steady. You finished the story. Claire smiled through her tears. No, she whispered. We did. A single beam of light broke through the clouds, glinting across the sea, as if the world itself had exhaled at last. She slipped Edward's tag from her neck and placed it into the box beside the photos. You're home now, she said softly. All of you. Then she closed the lid, sealing it with her palm. The air grew still, peaceful, eternal. The sea below, at last, was quiet. Months passed. Spring slipped quietly into summer, and life moved on. At least, it seemed to. The book had become a phenomenon now, translated into a dozen languages, taught in schools, quoted at memorials. Claire's inbox overflowed again, not with questions this time, but with stories, people finding their letters, their own lost words. It began small. A fisherman in Normandy wrote to her saying he'd found a sealed envelope inside a washed-up ammunition box. The name on the front? Private Thomas Ellery, one of Edward's old comrades mentioned in the early letters. Inside was a note written in faded ink. We heard him singing, "Tell Lily the sea will carry us home." Then came another report, this time from a farmer in Flanders who unearthed a letter while plowing his field. The soil had preserved it perfectly. It was dated 1918 and signed EW. If these words reach anyone, know that we did not vanish. We became the earth. Claire read that one over and over. The handwriting was his, without question. But how could it appear now, after she'd sealed everything? Soon, more stories surfaced. A teacher in Toronto found an envelope slipped between the pages of a donated library book, its paper impossibly old, yet crisp. A child in New Zealand discovered one floating in a bottle by the shore. Each bore the same red wax seal with the small seashell imprint. The world began calling it the Tide Letters. Newspapers speculated, historians searched for explanations. No one found one that made sense. But Claire didn't look for answers. She knew. One evening, she returned to the cliffs at Dover. The grass was high, the sea calm. She carried no chest, no letters, only herself. As she stood there, a gentle breeze rose from the water, carrying with it a single scrap of paper. It twirled through the air and landed at her feet. She picked it up, smiling softly. The handwriting was unmistakable. The story doesn't end. It moves with the tide. Tears welled in her eyes. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her coat pocket. As she turned to leave, the wind carried a distant hum. Voices not in sorrow now, but in song. Edward's, faint among them. Home isn't where you begin, Lily. It's where your words finally rest. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sea shimmered gold. Claire whispered into the wind, then rest well. And for the first time, the sea was utterly, beautifully silent. By the next year, the phenomenon of the Tide Letters had become more than just a mystery. It was a movement. Museums, schools, and families around the world gathered to read them aloud every Remembrance Day. Soldiers' names once buried in dusty archives now found their way into hearts and homes. It was as if Edward's words had awakened something that time itself had forgotten. But for Claire, it had become something deeper, a calling. She had begun researching her family history in earnest, determined to uncover how her life had become woven into Edward and Lily's story. One night, deep in the National Archives, surrounded by fading documents and the steady hum of old lights, she found it. A birth certificate. Lillian Whitmore, born 1893. A death record. Lillian Whitmore, presumed lost at sea, 1920. And then, below it, a small handwritten note from a registrar dated 1921. Child survived. Unnamed girl, adopted under record 482 W. Taken to Dover Orphanage. Claire's pulse quickened. She flipped through the file. There it was, the child's name added years later, Margaret Whitmore. Her grandmother. Her fingers trembled. Lily hadn't vanished into legend. She'd survived, pregnant when Edward's last letter never arrived. The sea hadn't taken her, it had carried her. Claire leaned back, dizzy with realization. She was Lily's bloodline. Edward's story had lived on through her. It explained everything. The pull to the letters, the dreams of the trenches, the whispers in the waves. The reason Edward had written to Claire. He had seen her somehow, across time, across loss, and known that one day she would listen. She closed the file, tears blurring her vision. For the first time, the story wasn't about ghosts. It was about a promise fulfilled. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady. The sound against the window pane reminded her of the rhythm of the sea. She pulled out the last letter she still carried, the one she'd found on the cliffs, the one that had said, "The story doesn't end." "Maybe it doesn't," she whispered. At that moment, a flash of light caught her eye, a reflection from the glass cabinet in the corner. Inside, displayed among war relics, was something she hadn't seen before. A photograph, black and white, two figures on a cliff. One was Edward. The other, unmistakably, was Lily. He blinked. "We thought you sent it." It came in the final batch, labeled for Claire, Dover source. It was clear as day, no static. Old-fashioned, but perfect. Her breath caught. She knew. Tears spilled freely as the voices faded, replaced by the soft, distant sound of waves. though London was miles from the sea. People in the crowd began whispering, some smiling, others quietly crying. A little boy near the fountain reached into the water and pulled out a small object, a poppy petal, perfectly preserved, though the flowers had all been removed before the ceremony. Claire smiled through her tears. "You made it, Edward," she whispered. That night, the world changed. Radio stations replayed the event. Universities studied the mysterious final voice. Scientists tried to analyze the frequency. It didn't match any known recording process. The mystery spread, but Claire didn't chase explanations anymore. Instead, she returned to Dover one last time. She stood on the cliff at twilight, the sea shimmering below. She held one final letter in her hand, her own, this time. To whoever finds this, remember them, not as ghosts, but as hearts that refuse to fade. The tide will carry the rest. She placed it gently into a small glass bottle, sealed it, and threw it into the sea. The waves caught it, pulled it under, and for a moment, the water glowed faintly gold, as if the world itself was writing back. 100 years later, the sea was still whispering. It was the year 2125. The cliffs of Dover had changed, taller, more eroded, carved by wind and time. But the view was the same. Endless blue meeting endless sky. A young girl stood there, her hair tangled by the ocean breeze. Her name was Evelyn Wren. She was 16, curious, restless, and a descendant of historians, though she didn't much care for books. She preferred the waves. Her school had assigned a project on digital echoes of the past, and she'd chosen to explore the myth of the tide letters, a story so old most people thought it was legend. A soldier's words, a woman's discovery, a mystery that reached across time. According to records, the last known letter had been thrown into the sea by a woman named Claire Whitmore. No one had ever found it. Until now. The sun was dipping low when Evelyn saw it, a small glass bottle glinting in the surf below. She scrambled down, shoes slipping on wet rock, and pulled it from the water. The seal was cracked but intact, the parchment inside faintly golden. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. The paper was old but readable, the ink dark as the sea itself. To whoever finds this, we were never meant to fade. The tide carries what the world forgets. My name is Claire Whitmore. I told a story once, a story of a soldier named Edward and a girl named Lily. If you are reading this, it means their words still move with the waves. Tell them again, not as ghosts, but as people who loved fiercely and refused to be forgotten. And if you listen closely, you might still hear them. CW. Evelyn looked up, the sea shimmering gold beneath the evening sun. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she heard voices. Not sad, not haunting, singing. She smiled, tears in her eyes without knowing why. She lifted her camera and began to record. "My name is Evelyn Wren," she said softly, her voice trembling. And this is where it all began. Behind her, the waves rose and fell in rhythm, carrying a whisper that would never truly fade. The story doesn't end. And it didn't. Because stories like Edward's and Lily's, like Claire's, never die. They drift. They return. They wait for someone new to listen. As the sun sank into the sea, the tide rolled in, and far below the surface, letters danced like light. Each one a name. Each one a heartbeat. Each one a promise kept. The end.